This is Korby Lenker, a Nashville Renaissance man, award-winning songwriter, published author, filmmaker, and creator of Morse Code, a scripted TV series loosely based on his life.
At the end of the day, I'm in the meaning business.
In this episode, we cover what bluegrass, Final Cut Pro, and parking cars in Nashville have in common, the secret to actually finishing the big creative project you've been putting off, and the creative advice that changed his life and might change yours.
Oh, this is great advice. This is the only reason you're talking to me, for this one piece of advice, which is just like...
This episode is for anyone interested in living a truly creative life. Let's dive in. I like the corduroy. You got corduroy in the full thing, although the tie is kind of left out.
Well, that's because the corduroy tie is incoming.
Okay, good.
I go through these seasons where I just kind of pick a uniform, and it's not like a conscious thing. It's sort of, I gravitate toward a fabric. I noticed in hindsight, and I'm really into corduroy right now. Yeah, like corduroy on corduroy on corduroy, and when the tie comes,
it's complete. So, and the socks as well.
Yeah, the socks. The day they make corduroy socks is the day I buy them.
It sounds incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, stay tuned. I'll let you know.
Yeah, let me know. Welcome to Playback.
Thanks, man. It's great to be here.
Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. I have so many questions for you. When people ask you, what do you do? What do you say?
I look off into the distance and collect myself, and I say, I am a troubadour in the classic sense, most likely. And, through songs and stories and more recently films, I explore that storytelling facility. So probably at the very end of the day, I would say I'm a storyteller.
Where did that start for you? Like, back me up to as far as we can go back. Like, when did you become a storyteller? When did you know that's something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, I had a mom who was very intense about reading and wanting to instill in us a love of reading at an early age. And it really took with me. And so I remember actually I had an experience when I was probably 6 or 7, and it's just an indelible memory now, but we were on vacation. I grew up in a small town in Idaho, Twin Falls, Idaho. They're in the potato patch. And so it was close to Canada. And one year we took a Canadian vacation. And so my dad loaded up the Ford Escort station wagon, I remember. So my dad was driving, my mom was riding shotgun, and me and my brother were in the back seat. And my mom was reading to us while dad drove. This is probably like 80 something. And the book she was reading was this book called Where the Red Fern Grows, which is kind of a classic now among some circles and maybe my generation. But it's sort of the quintessential boy and his dog story. In this case, 2 dogs, Old Dan and Little Ann, for those of you out there who know. And mom's reading this book, and she had been reading it, and on the vacation, it was kind of getting toward the end of the story, and she's reading kind of the climactic moment in the story. And it's affecting, and she starts tearing up, and like voice starts shaking, and initially, me just being like the not super sensitive 6-year-old, I was just like, God, Mom, get it together, man. We're just trying to have a good time on this family vacation. And real quick, I was like, wait, what? Old Dan? And I was just like, it just punched me in the heart, this story, like words on a page, And I started crying. I was embarrassed. So I turned my face away because I didn't want my little brother to see. And I looked back, and he was staring out the window and his little shoulders were going. And my dad started crying. He had pulled over the car. We had a good old family cry. And I was just like, this was a huge watershed moment where I would realize stories were so much more than Dr. Seuss. No credit to Dr. Seuss, but you could be affected at a fundamental level with somebody's power to convey a story through just words alone. And man, I've just been on a love affair with it ever since. I remember just charging right into those Beverly Cleary books in 3rd grade, and then all the Roald Dahl books. I could recite every single Roald Dahl book right now.
Go.
Oh my God. Danny the Champion of the World, James and the Giant Peach, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory,
Wow.
Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, Matilda, the BFG, the Witches. I think that's all of them. He also wrote an autobiography called Boy, which is fantastic.
Wow.
But anyway, yeah, I've just been a big reader ever since. And I also kind of parallel with that, I was interested in music at a young age. And I think that was another thing that my parents kind of instilled in us as part of their package of being parents. You know, they were like, you're going to take piano lessons. They assigned me piano lessons. They assigned my brother Suzuki method fiddle. And it was sort of arbitrary when I landed at piano, and I kind of took to it and I enjoyed it. Even though I hated practicing 30 minutes a day, I still kind of liked I just liked what you could do, you know? And as I got older, I got more and more serious about music, and I was in bands and stuff. And the reading thing has just been a through line ever since. So,
what makes a good story?
What makes a good story is cause and effect and character change across time. And what makes a great story is, I think, is the best stories always have an element of self-sacrifice, some sacrifice of the self to a greater cause. And there's something so deep in that kind of story. You know, it's like there's no greater gift than you can give to somebody than laying down your life for a friend. I think that's in the Bible or something, but it's in other texts too, ancient texts. That's a great story. I think that all stories have some element of that, you know? Mothers are self-sacrificing to their children. Individual band members are self-sacrificing, if they're good, to the song, to the band. You know, there's some element of surrendering yourself to the greater cause that I think resonates with everybody.
There's a couple of threads I want to pull on here. It seems like, only having known you for a little bit here, you do so many different things, and the story of your life is interesting and weaves in a lot of different skill sets and passions and ideas. How do you think about story as it relates to your personal story, your life?
I'll say I notice that the stories that resonate with me most strongly, be they songwriters, or traditional writers, prose writers, novelists, they always have an element of the personal in them. And that's to say, like, some of the most moving stories to me always are about the specific person writing them, even if it's still a fictitious representation of them in the story, but it's still so close to that person that you can tell that there's real personal stake in that story. And there's a couple of examples I can think of. There's a writer, Karl Ove Knausgaard, who's this Swedish guy, and his big moment happened maybe about 10 years ago, but this is gonna sound awful. He wrote this series of books called My Struggle, and it's the story of a Swedish writer trying to write a novel, and it's spread across 6 volumes. And wow, it sounds awful, doesn't it? But it is weirdly unputdownable. And why that is, I've asked myself this question a lot, because there was something about the first book, and when I read that, I was just like, man, it pierced me, you know? And it was so, part of it was because of the self-revelation and the writer's willingness to just put the lance to himself in terms of his own self-perceived frailties and his vanities, and also maybe his courage, you know, too. All of those things. But at the center of it was him, you know, Karl Ove. And that story and the genre is kind of commonly known as metafiction, and that effort to sort of put oneself so in the center of the story, on some level it's like, wow, vanity of vanities, but on another level it can be tremendously revealing. There's one, and the other thing that it just occurs to me is a screenplay by Charlie Kaufman called Adaptation, which was a big movie in, I think, 2003, starred Nicolas Cage and Meryl Streep was in it. Another fantastic picture, and he wrote himself into the screenplay. He was supposed to adapt this book called The Orchid by Susan Orleans, and instead he wrote the story of himself trying to adapt a screenplay by Susan Orleans. And it's so, the way the movie comes together, I mean, it's kind of been like, when it came out in 2003, I feel like it was so novel. It was just, it kind of turned the screenplay world sideways because it hadn't really been attempted before. now there's things like that Karl Love book that was 10 years after that, so it's a little bit more common. I think BoJack Horseman, you could say, has some play with that same world. I noticed that what I gravitate toward in singer-songwriters are personal voices, as opposed to what you might call like more like purely commercial songs, which are really fun and maybe even super meaningful. Like I think of, I don't know why this song popped into my head, but like "Jesus Take the Wheel" is like a big country song from forever ago, and it's a every man's kind of song, or every woman's song. I think is the heroine in that song. But for the most part, I like John Prine or Todd Snider or Neil Young or Elliott Smith, or there's something kind of naive in the approach to writing the song that I recognize in myself. Maybe that's why I like it so much. I don't think I could write "Jesus Take the Wheel," but I could write my version of, I don't know, "Summer's End."
Yeah. In these writers that you just mentioned, songwriters and screenplay writers, what is it that takes something from being sort of trite, like a story about oneself, or writing a song that feels almost cliche because it's so on the nose, versus something that's self-narrative and sort of rings with this truthiness? Like, what do you think differentiates those two? How does one strive for the latter?
I read once in a screenplay book, an advice book, this quote, and I was like, that rings true. And the quote's very simple. It's "be near the cliche." And I think that gets at something, because the cliche is a cliche for a reason. It's like a universal truth commonly expressed. But God, it's a cliche, But being close to it is where the winning tone is. Before you can claim to have a love of writing, and I don't know if I have a love of writing, I have a love of having written, but what predates that, or the prerequisite for that, is to have a love of reading. And I definitely have a love of reading, and I think that if you have a love of the form that you're trying to express yourself through, that love necessarily will compel you to investigate the people who've gone before you, who have done it at a very high level. And I think that if you spend a bunch of time at the feet of the masters, that can't help but be instructive as to what you might do for yourself in a different way. If you call yourself a sonnet writer, you're not going to just like magically write an extraordinary timeless sonnet, having not read all the sonnets of Shakespeare. You know what I mean? Like, and I think the same goes true if you're like trying to write a confessional song. You better study at the feet of the people that did it before.
Who are those paragons for you? Who do you model your artistry or your life after?
Good question, Spencer. Like I said, I really have always liked the troubadours. Another story from my childhood, small town Idaho. My parents, not terribly interested in music. They never bought a record as long as I lived at the house. Nor were they very interested, but we went to church a lot, and that's where the music came from for me. But I happened to befriend in high school this kid, Nelson Salisbury, shout out Nels, whose parents were, I would just say, like the coolest people in Twin Falls. And the dad, Osborne, had an extraordinary record collection. He was a big Beatles fan and Neil Young fan, and that music was always playing whenever I went over there. And that was when I was just like, whoa. And I noticed that what I really liked were the singer, I guess they were, now I know, singer-songwriters, but people who wrote their own songs and played their own instruments. And I took it as just for granted, that's what being an artist was. You wrote your own songs, you learned how to play your instrument, as well as you could, and you sang your own songs. And I only learned much later that that's a subset of the larger way of doing it. But to this day, I've always admired those people that were, great songwriters. I mean, Jason Isbell would be just a perfect example of there's nobody maybe doing it better than him right now. Such a fantastic instrumentalist, great singer. And it's the songs, man, the songs for days, the craft in those songs. That's to me the gold standard, and then there's this lineage that stretches back, to Woody Guthrie and before, of that kind of personal voice style of singer-songwriting. And I've always been attracted to it.
It strikes me that with certain skills, learning guitar, for instance, there are very concrete techniques and strategies that you must understand. Mapping the fretboard, kind of understanding how the body should move to make a certain sound. It's very concrete how to progress on the guitar to a certain level. With writing, it feels enigmatic. What are the things, when you go to work on the skill of writing, what are the things that you, or storytelling, what are the things that what are the materials that you're working with that you're like, I need to get better at this aspect of writing, or I need to improve at this, and how do you tackle that as like from a skill acquisition perspective?
Yeah, I'm very much a work in progress on that account, and I think that what I've had some amount of success in, and what I'm building on, is my ability to write short stories, and so hard to talk about yourself real close, but I'll try in a way that's not super annoying. I write for emotion, and I'm a really emotional person. And short stories are a little bit on the formless side of the thing. They can be, short means 1,000 words or 10,000 words. So there's a lot of room in there. And within that, there's a lot of, it could be almost a personnel essay, but not quite. Or it could be just a totally wild spinning fantasy. And I notice that when I write, I usually have some kind of emotional need to understand myself first and foremost. Like, what is going on here? That it hurts. So how do I get that out of me so that I can be free of it? And that often, like this book that got published, is a bunch of short stories of various lengths, and they're all close to things that happen to me in real life. They usually start with some semblance of fact and maybe go somewhere else. Like if I hadn't, sometimes it's like, what if I had walked through that door? What might have happened? Whereas instead I just went home and went to bed. Like I said, I'm a work in progress. I'm right now at the end of a first draft of a novel, which is what I did last year. And I just, wow, talk about a painful process, because I'm taking something that's sort of like an approach to writing that involves like sort of white knuckling it in one push for as hard as I can go. That's usually what the short stories are for me. I'll sit down and do it all the way through, however long it takes. And you can't do that with a book. And also you have to kind of think about the larger arc, and then you have to plot point it. It starts to get a lot more cerebral, strategic, and that is where I think I have some learning to do.
Yeah, so that's one of the meta skills, is sort of like narrative arc mapping and creating through line, pulling people through a story that's longer form.
Yes, and I mean, yes, but within that, I would just say that there's a lot of very successful writers who are wonderful storytellers who don't do any of that plot point writing or story mapping. And I think that there's a common expression used to describe writers. There's plotters and pantsers, or alternatively, architects and gardeners. Architects being more the people that sit, at the storyboard and line up the plot points and plan their story and then write to those points. Whereas gardeners write to discover. And no matter the length of the effort, I will always be a gardener.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Earlier you said, I enjoy having written, but I can't remember how you phrased it. It was very eloquent. You said, I enjoy having written, but I don't enjoy the writing process.
Yeah.
Or something to that effect.
Yeah, I second that.
What you agree?
I double down.
Still believe it. Tell me more about that. Like why? Yeah. What do you mean?
I mean, I don't know. I'm like, show me the guy who says he likes to write, and I will show you a guy that's a bald-faced liar. I don't know. I've met some few people who were like, no, I just love writing. I'm like, why or how? It's nothing but totally torturous to me. It's so difficult.
Why?
I mean, have you ever written anything?
I wrote my name a couple of days ago. It was tough. I had to like draw the S and the.
I mean, just coming up with something out of nothing is always, to me, the number one hardest thing ever. Mm-hmm. And anything after that is zillion times easier. If it's acting, if it's playing a guitar solo over a song, like, not to take anything away from guitar players. I'm just so in awe of masterful players, like you mentioned like Guthrie and Critter. But like the coming up with something out of nothing is just like, well, how does that even happen? I mean, I've been doing it for 25 years and I still could not really tell you how to do it. I don't know how to do it myself. And I'm like terrified. Ugh, this makes me uncomfortable, but like I'm terrified still to do it, like every time. I'm afraid, because what if I fail? What if it's a bad song? What if I spend 3 hours and come up with nothing? Like, that's a great risk. I have a kid now, I'm like a responsible dad. But in all seriousness, it's just like this novel that I spent, I don't know how many countless hours last year writing, day after day after day, may never see the light of day. It may be objectively terrible. There's all these things, and I am, what drove me to do it was simply the self-imposed obligation to hit my word count, and just like, I will just make sure that I put another sentence and another sentence, and I do my best. And once in a while, you write something that's good. I don't know. I mean, like, there's songwriters out there. I feel the same way about the songs. I've written so many songs, and I think 5 of them are pretty good. I've made a career off of 55 of them, but it's like, you just aim high and you're going to fall short in advance. How is that not painful?
What's you mentioned having a word count. What other processes help you to push through that resistance of this is going to be hard? How do you approach consistency over the number of 20 plus years that you've been doing this? I mean, it's annoying. This is not very inspiring, but discipline is a huge part of it. It's just like, you say you're going to do it, you do it. That's it. You can feel however you want. I notice that I do things all the time that I don't really want to do, even though they're kind of in the creative bucket. Like, really what I want to do is, honestly, sit at Dino's and drink cheap beer and watch baseball games. That would be like my dream. But instead, I'm sitting here, trying to write a song for why I don't quite know. That's a little stark. Okay, hold on a second. Like, if it's songwriting is kind of fun. Like, to me, because there's music involved, and music is fun. Like, if music is a different thing, because you're making music, and music means one chord, and it's so beautiful to play a G chord. It's so beautiful, and if you put 2 chords together, it's just like, if you play G to E minor back and forth, and now you're trying to write a song, but you're hanging out, and it's just kind of fun. To me, it's like enchanting. Whereas there's just something so like sad and lonely about being over your laptop in the wee hours of the morning, just trying to push the little pixels across. It's just so like, there's nothing fun. I don't know. Once in a while, you'll get on a tear, and it'll be kind of like, whoa, and you'll wonder where the time went. Like, you got to stay high if you're going to try to do these really hard things that take a long time. And I stay high by staying inspired the best I can. And the discipline part of it, and then just like also perspective. Like, this doesn't matter in a way. If it's not on some level fun, then why are you doing it? And so I guess it is on some level fun. I like having written. I like when it feels terrible while I'm doing it. I think I'm awful while I'm doing it, and then when I read back, it's like sometimes I'm like, well, that's not that bad. I guess I'd put my name to that and send it out there. You express yourself through books, Medium Hero, through music, through film, through all of these different creative mediums. Why? Like, what compels you to create in all of these different ways, as opposed to just focusing on one or a couple of them? Like, what drives that?
I think it's a great question. When I started out, I was just like, I loved reading and writing, but I really wanted to be a rock star. Just like, I'll just say that out loud. And I was in high school, I had a band that we kind of had some momentum for small town Idaho. And then when I went to college out in a town north of Seattle called Bellingham, and started a bluegrass band there. And that was just sort of like luck of proximity, and who I met a couple of guys who could really play. And at the same time, I was discovering Doc Watson and Norman Blake and Tony Rice and Dave Grisman and the West Coast guys, Old and in the Way. And then from there, I got into Bill Monroe and the Stanley Brothers. And I was just like, bluegrass music was sort of but it was just a weird timing thing where I got together with those guys. We played a show, and then we played our first show, and then the Oh Brother soundtrack dropped like 2 or 3 weeks later. And all of a sudden everybody wanted to hear bluegrass music, and we were just like at the time, we were like kind of the only young guys doing it. And so we just hit the ground running. I was just very lucky in that sense. That ran its course. I started doing other things, writing songs. But I've, contrary to appearances, I've never been extraordinarily financially successful at what I've done. And so that has meant I've had to just pivot a lot. When I moved to Nashville, like 19 years ago, I had kind of a thing going out in the Pacific Northwest where I'd made several records, and it just felt like I was about to turn 30, and it was like, maybe I should go to the big show. And I had come to Nashville a couple of times, and there were some people in the industry that sort of set the table a little bit for me, made me feel like it wouldn't be totally insane. And when I finally moved, and immediately first immediately, everything was going great. I won like a song contest at Merle Fest, which was like the Chris Austin songwriting contest, which is sadly not part of the festival anymore, but it was for a long time, and it broke. Like, I mean, Gillian Welch was an early winner there, and Tift Merritt, and some just wonderful songwriters. And I was like, I got to be part of that little group or tradition. And that was like the first 2 weeks I was here. And then I got picked up by a little indie, and I was just like, this is great, man. What was I waiting for? I should have moved here ages ago. And then cut to like 8 months later, the indie had folded, the label had folded. I was just destitute broke and had no employable skills, and was like 3,000 miles away from my fan base. And I was just like, whoa, wake up call. And my feelings were a little hurt. And I ended up having to get a straight job, which I'd never had. Looking back, this is the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was a little bit of a prince before I moved to Nashville. I kind of thought my shit didn't stink. And I show up, and like, no one cares. I have to get a job at a hotel parking cars and punching a clock. And I had that job for like 3 years. And after, really just like maybe 2 weeks of me being like, oh, this isn't what I thought my life was going to be like, I was like, whoa, this is kind of awesome. No one cares about me. Like, I have this job that's fine. I have low rent, and all I have to do is just show up and not crash a car. That's pretty easy. And it turned out I wasn't entirely successful at that, given enough time. But it was during that time I started writing these stories more, because I had time. I wasn't trying to tour anymore, and I didn't have to keep the ball rolling. I think a lot of people don't understand this, to young people starting out, is that if you get some success, you get some like notoriety or something as an artist, man, you got to keep it going now. Like, and you got to keep coming up with new stuff, and you got to build on the thing that came before. And with that comes like a very real loss of freedom in a way. Whereas if you just toil in obscurity, my friend, such conditions apply. I could work in this straight job, and I wrote all these stories down, and I got really into it because no one was watching me, and I had time. I did that, and then I learned. That was when I started getting into filming and video, and I learned how to edit on Final Cut for no real reason, just because I thought it was kind of fun, and I just had time. So then when things kind of picked back up, I got a little bit of some small success in songwriting competitions and stuff, that I got to start touring again. Well, then I had all this other stuff and these skills, and I've always kind of eventually brought it back around to the musical side of what I do. But in those lulls, I kind of picked up, I'm noticing this in hindsight, honestly. Like, when I was in it, it just kind of sucked, and it was just sort of a necessity. But when when the things kind of picked back up, as I sort of knew that they would in a way, then I had a new perspective, a new skill set, new merch for the table. that was a big part of it. And I'm still, I feel like I'm on an endless pivot. We could talk about the film side of it, and this year is all about music. I've just put out new music again, and it's all.
How do you think about pivots? Like, how do you navigate them, and how do you choose to do one or not choose to do one?
Yeah, it's just like, if you enjoy something, go all in and let it happen. Whatever happens will happen. What's the worst that can happen is everyone in the room laughs at you. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're just like, if you're, you just laugh too, then they don't got anything on you. And so I think that there's part of that. I was like, I've thrown myself into things that I maybe had no business doing just to see what would happen. And sometimes it really sucked. And then sometimes it mostly sucked, but my life changed a little bit. Like, I met a new set of people. And what's driven that really has just been curiosity of just like, I love this, being alive and meeting people that are interesting and trying to figure it out for themselves and being around. I'm just like addicted to talent. Can I swear on this? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I fucking love talent. My own, other people's. I just want to be around it. I don't care what it is. I just want to be around it. And that's what's guided me. And in some ways, it's diluted the specialization. I think that maybe I should be a better flat picker than I am, though I can kind of do it because I spend a lot of time trying to do it. I should be a better actor than I am, but I can kind of do it because I spend a lot of time trying to do it. And it's just because I just like being around people that glow. And if they glow, I just want to, I don't know, I just liked being in the mix. And so there's that piece of it. And then just like the lack of any super success in one thing has made it necessary to just be available to pivot. This thing that I just came out of, I'm in a new musical chapter, but I spent the last 6 years writing and producing and acting in this TV pilot, loosely based on my life. And that was such a huge project and so all-consuming and all-demanding. And in some ways, just like a first-class headache. But in another more important, deeper way, it was just like the best way to test myself and like where I was in my life up to that moment. It's like, it involved music, it involved acting, it involved writing, it involved people management, which I'm really interested in now. After, like, that was something I didn't learn until I was in my late 30s. Like, after having done the independent troubadour thing for so long, I just got a little sick of it being my name on the marquee, and it was just like me in a car by myself or with one other guy, and it was just like me. And the first time I got on film set, I was just very attracted to the collaborative nature of film production, how many moving parts there are and how many people there are. And that's a thing that's persisted going forward. So anyway, the Morse code effort put all of those things together, and it was also just like a big try, and I love that. Like, I always wanted to do something that nobody had quite done before, and so the idea of like making a movie about yourself, it sounds terrible when I say it out loud, but it was really fun to try to like tell a narrative around something that I really am passionate about and am part of a community of singer-songwriters that are lifers, that make songs from their heart, from their own perspective, that generated some kind of income to allow them to continue doing it. Maybe they're raising a family or paying a mortgage, but they're not famous meaningfully, but they're like animated by this passion. I'm like, I love those people. I have a heart for that community. And so I told a story about a guy from that community, and that it kind of ran its course. We tried to sell it, still might sell. Who knows? Anything's possible. And my wife and I, we were about to have a kid. We did have a kid in December, and in November we were like, "What's 25 going to be like?" And we both agreed that it was just going to be like, we're going to put out a bunch of music because this is what I do. And my Spotify numbers were abysmal because I didn't play the game. Really bad. And I was like, I can't be known as the guy with 885 monthly listeners. Like, that is not acceptable. So we got to get back in the game, man. And so we just like hit it with a vengeance. And now, it's just like I'm just on this crazy adventure. And this is this moment in that journey.
Can I ask you about finishing things? You have made lots of things in your life, and from personal experience and from friends who are on similar journeys. Getting from a concept to a published book or to a finished film or a record, putting out in the world is incredibly hard. And I think a lot of people trail off at the 60% mark where like they lose the momentum and they're not able to kind of like tie the bow on the thing and ship it. It seems like you've gotten good at that skill. Can you talk about how you think about that, how you push through that last mile of like kicking the thing out into the world?
This last project, Morse Code, the TV pilot, is an example of having run up, having gone as far as I could by myself with an idea, and then knowing that it really wasn't competitive in its current state. And I really am, I'm a competitive motherfucker, man. I don't want to do something that it doesn't have a shot at just being like a winning, try. I'm not a hobbyist. I'm not interested in hobbies. I have no hobbies. But for like this particular thing, it started as, I wasn't like, I'm going to make a TV show. It was, I got hired for, on a music video for a band as the dad in the music video. So I was watching the band be the stars of the thing, and I was like the actor. I was totally fine with it. It was fine. But I met a kid on the set who was my kid, my TV kid, and she was just like a little spitfire, and I had so much fun just gabbing with her. And I went home and I was like, the book had just gotten published, and I was like, man, it'd be interesting to just like write a scene for me and Maggie. And so I did that just as an exercise. And then I thought, maybe if I wrote a little bit of a one-page intro and a one-page outro, like if it was cool, then we could make another one. And I had no vision for beyond that, but like the finished part, oh, this is great advice. This is the only reason you're talking to me for this one piece of advice, which is just like finish the smallest possible iteration of the thing that you're envisioning. Do the easiest version of it, because then you can finish that one small thing, but you can like have that. And then if it ended up being fun or it is slightly successful, you can build on that. But like I would not ever go from 0 to novel or 0 to full length feature. I would go from 0 to 10-page script, 0 to 5-page. It's the earliest, the smallest possible. 1-page script and film it with 2 phones and put it on TikTok. You know what I mean? It's like, because there's so much satisfaction. A, there's satisfaction in finishing something. B, you get feedback, which is incredibly valuable because you don't know if you're any good at something. You might have a gut feeling at it, but you don't know until people respond to it. And that's critical to know whether you have any business going forward, or maybe you should try something else. But like with this, so I wrote this it was probably like a 5-page script. I rehearsed it with the kid, and she was great. And I was like, let's just do this because it'll be fun. And at that time I had enough connections in the local film community that I cast the other roles, produced it. I found a location. It was basically a very simple scene at an ice cream shop. So I found an ice cream shop that let us do it. I was like, I have no money, but we'll buy all the ice cream cones for the casting crew. And they were like, all right, fine. Yeah, I ended up meeting my wife on that set the very first day. My now wife, she was just like an extra on the thing. She would hate me saying that. She now runs the show. Like, she is a super powerhouse person that she ended up producing Morse Code and has produced many other things here in town. Anyway, but we did that one thing. I built on my knowledge of film, of Final Cut and editing. I edited it myself because I had no money. And then I learned how to sound edit it. And I did that, and then I had, from a previous connection, a guy who was a producer in town I asked him to be the composer for free, and he was like, it was interesting to him because it was like a new discipline. And so top shelf, world-class composer composed it. We screened it at the basement, OG Basement East. It was 6 minutes long. I played a set before, and it was fun. It's like everyone who was involved in it came out. It was like 40 people that were kind of part of it in some way. They enjoyed it, I enjoyed it, and I was like, there's a clue. Like, make another one. And so I did 4 of those over the 2 years between tours. And each time just like wrote up another like 15 pages and thought about like what I could do to take advantage of who I might know that was more famous than me, or like just anything that you can do to like draw a little attention to your effort is helpful. And so I did that until 2019. And then at that point, longer story shorter, I was just like, I don't know how to make this a proper pilot. Like, I want to raise a bunch of money for this, and I need more help. But I had all this, this back catalog now up to this point, and it was kind of known in the local community. And so I've hooked up with a guy that had co-created a TV show called Still the King, which was running at the same time as Nashville here in town, Travis Nicholson. And he was just like, this is another thing too. I've just had moments in my life where it just went, and I just knew this is what's going to happen. And that was meeting Travis was one of those moments. He showed up at our meeting, and I was just like, man, I'm just going to work with this guy. I can totally tell he's perfect. And I think that he knows it too, some way. It's like we were just a great match for this project. And he's like the funniest person in the room. He's a lot funnier than me. And he also had some like more experience with screenwriting. But over the pandemic, man, we went through like 30 or 40 iterations of that script and just like tapped it into shape. And then I raised money for it from my 20 years of, building up a fan base in my little corner of the folk world. I've never had a ton of fans, but I've had like people that like me. Like there's a small percentage of them, God help them, they really like me. They like the deal. And so when it came time, I just like put my hand up in the air and made a big ask, and a couple people really like answered the call, and it made it so we could do this thing. So anyway, that was such an adventure. And again, it's like, this is what I want to do. I have these goals. There's a lot of things I can control and a lot of things I can't control, a lot more things I can't control. And I'm just going to do the best with what I can control, and also then like let go of the rest. And then like it makes it easier when things don't quite work out the way you think they're going to. If you're attached to outcomes, you're just going to be miserable. I know so many people that are even successful people that are kind of miserable because they're just like not as successful as they were a year ago, or their last record didn't do as well. Or, it's just really a terrible game to play, because it's like human nature. As soon as you achieve one goal, the bar just goes that much farther. And now like you don't even care about that, the old thing that you were just like so passionate about, or that metric that you wanted so badly last year. It's like, God, way in the rear view. But if you can just stay right here and enjoy the thing, then you might get really lucky. My dream still is to make a season of Morse code television and tell that story about that world and that family. And it may or may not happen. If it does, that will be fantastic. If it doesn't, it's just like, it's okay. It really is.
Yeah, 100%. So if you were speaking to either a younger version of yourself or someone who is in their early 20s, a giant ball of creative energy, wanting to just be a creative person in the world and make it work so they can sustain themselves and be fully expressed, what advice would you have for them?
Man, the world is so different than when I was 20. So that's, first of all, big disclaimer, because nowadays it's going to involve your phone most likely. And one thing that I didn't do that I maybe should have done was develop a skill that afforded me an income that enabled me to do more of the creative thing I want to do. I spent my 20s just like trying to make music pay. And consequently, I was just utterly destitute for my whole 20s. And I was in some basic ways, I didn't care. I also just spent a bunch of time reading Russian literature, and I just did all kinds of things that generated no income. I think I wouldn't have done that quite. I think it would have been smarter to, even if it's just waiting tables or something, like a gig to pay the bills, to like soften everything. Now, I would also just something I worry about now, because I'm very much in this in terms of like breaking new music, having stepped away from it for a long time, and also now being in a place where I'm not interested in touring constantly, which I was for many years. I am kind of breaking this new song I wrote, Meet Me at the End of the World, in the modern way, which is a lot of short form videos. And I wake up I mean, that's a big part of my day now, is like creating and posting short form video content, which is a game I can play. And I, again, I like kind of enjoy it. My wife and I sit there and bandy about ideas about what to do. And it's another thing which is like, I do care. I want them to be successful. I want this song to be successful for sure. But any one try, I don't worry about it too much. Like, it's just a try. And if something comes of it, that's a clue. If it's successful, it's like, okay, let's do something like this again. But what I worry about is that, like, unlike when I was 25 and, pouring through classic literature, which I think is incredibly valuable for a lot of reasons, just to make you an interesting person and to just give you a lot of perspective about human nature and history and the way people are, which invariably goes into your creativity. I am on my phone so much. I read for 25 minutes every morning. That's what I give myself. And that's very precious time. But I worry about, like, the 20-year-old who's like trying to make it pay, and it's like short form content, sitting there thinking of ideas, and then that's all fine. But like, you're going to turn 30 someday, and you want to have something deeper than some glib, quick, shiny successes. And it's not to devalue that. I think it's, in this attention economy, any success in getting attention is like, chef's kiss, awesome. Yeah. I salute you. But you want to have something to actually give culture, after they've given you their attention.
It seems like investing in something deeper and more meaningful than simply short form content might be part of it.
Absolutely. I mean, we were talking before the tape was rolling about your project, the IRLs, is that what you call them? Yeah. Which I think, could you say that a little bit? I know this isn't about you, but I think this is really interesting.
Intensive recreational learning retreats. So
yes.
Basically like short form, 3 to 4 days, bring together a group of friends in a really cool location to just binge learn a certain skill. And it could be something completely silly and pointless, like learn a bunch of magic tricks, or it could be something very practical, like I'm working on a bunch of house projects right now. So the next one that I'd like to do is a general contracting IRL, where you just learn all of the systems necessary to understand how to GC your own like home improvement project, to understand HVAC systems and whatnot. It's a fun creative project to bring friends together and nerd out on a thing.
Yeah, and to have something to show for it at the end. That's I think the part that you really got my attention with that.
Yeah.
Those skills, like having real skills, is super valuable. And I've sometimes wonder about this whole, like, the creative art pursuit. When you watch, like, I'm interested in YouTube and building up a YouTube channel. When you watch guys that are really successful at that, I mean, it's just like square one advice. It's like, solve people's problems. Solve a problem for people. And that is like very good advice for just having success in life in general. It's just like, find a problem that people need help with and do it, like plumbing or general contracting or whatever. It's hard to like pitch songwriting or novel writing as solving a problem for somebody.
But it is on some level.
It is. Well, I've thought about this a lot. Exactly. And that's the only problem is maybe the most important problem, we would argue.
I agree.
The existential problem. Albert Camus said the only real question is whether or not to kill oneself. And that is, that's a dim view but a really, like, why live? Like, what gives life meaning? And I feel like, for me personally, I'm absolutely, and I think of it this way, is at the end of the day, I'm in the meaning business. I am trying to give meaning to my life, to my family's life, to my wife's life, to my daughter's life, and to my fans' life, and to my own life, and I do that through these efforts, these creative efforts.
Yeah, it reminds me of my previous boss, Jack Conte, who runs patreon.com. We would always have these types of conversations. It's like, okay, what's the purpose of all of this? Why do we care about artists getting funding and having sustainable careers? And he would always just say, like, the internet without creators is just like an empty shell. Like, creative people bring life to everything, honestly. It's like, what do you want to do on a weekend for fun? Well, you want to go see a movie or go check out a show, go see someone perform. Like, that is the thing that, if you're working a desk job, that's the thing that you live for, to go out on the weekends and check out artists making creativity and expressing humanity in a way that very few people can. So yeah, I think it is solving a very important problem.
I think this is a really important line of inquiry, and something I think about a lot, and something that I sometimes take issue with some creatives that maybe I think I was one before I moved to Nashville and kind of got my ass handed to me, where there was a little bit of an entitlement to me. I had some natural talent and I did work hard, but I felt like those two things meant people should like what I do. And the fact of the matter is that nobody owes you anything. And until you give people will tell you, they will give to you exactly what you give to them. It's just a one-to-one relationship. So if you can really inspire them, then they'll go with you to the ends of the earth. But short of that, there's going to be something. There's going to be a gap there between what you want to have happen and what does happen. And there's a great quote from a legendary filmmaker, Billy Wilder, who said, there's any one person can be a rube when criticizing you, but a packed audience, a packed theater is critical genius. That's what he said. Meaning that like a movie back in his days when this was like more centralized and controlled, and it's easier to track that stuff. A movie is as successful as it reaches people. That is it. You can say like, they didn't get me, I'm a genius and I'm misunderstood, but it's like, who cares? I mean, you can feel however you want, but that's been helpful to me as I've tried to do things that maybe fell short of what I was hoping, to just realize that like, well, whatever you did there, it just didn't quite line up. The communication wasn't there, and that's on me. I work very hard on trying to communicate the message and not have any expectations on other people to meet me any closer to where I'm at than where they're at. That's a kind of clumsy way of putting it, but it's on you as the artist. You're like, nobody owes you a damn thing. And I feel like, grant writing and stuff is really important sometimes, but at the end of the day, man, make something people want. Just make that be your gold standard. Judge yourself by that. And if you fall short of it, which you're going to most of your life, just use that as information to make the next thing better. You can make a whole life out of that.
Solid advice. I wonder if you would be open to playing a song.
Yeah, no, I would love to. That's what I came here to do.
Great.
I'm just glad to be here at the hallowed grounds of Carter Vintage. I'm intimidated by this place, man.
Oh, can you tell us the story of this guitar before you play?
Yeah, I bought this guitar brand new in 1999 at Dusty Strings in Seattle, which is still there in Fremont, legendary place. And yeah, that's all. That wasn't a cosmetic adjustment. There's a little bit of blood there, and I mean, this thing has been everywhere, and it really does need actually some love. I should just leave it here when I go with the repair.
You just try and swap it out with one of the pre-wars.
Let's see if anybody notices. But yeah, maybe I'll play this song that I was just talking about a second ago that just came out, and it's called "Meet Me at the End of the World." It was on an afternoon, there was an asteroid. We all watched the simulation. It fell from the sky in a trail of fire. I hid my eyes from the explosion, but I saw you smiling. You were laughing quietly when you leaned in close. I wasn't sure I heard. You said, meet me at the end of the world. I got a love like a pocket watch. I got a love like an albatross. You got a love like an unknown destination. But I'm a pretty good guess. I found you on the manifest, all dressed up for the occasion, yeah. And they say it's a fairy tale, sad as sailors chasing whales. But I hold my breath and dive down for this pearl, singing, meet me at the end of the world. I hold you, and the earthquake shuddered. I kiss you, and the ocean swell. I feel you next to me when the sky and sea meet upon the ending earth, blur into the curvature on the other side of heaven. It was on an afternoon, there was an asteroid. We all watched the simulation.
Lenker.
All right.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Thank you, Spencer.
Beautiful tune.
Thank you, brother.
Beautiful tune. Well, I really appreciate you coming out and making the time, man. Is there anything else that you would want to share with the audience here at Playback?
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in this thing, a little plug for a project I do, my own podcast, the Morse Code Podcast, which features a lot of, there's probably some overlapping guests with Playback. Critter Eldridge was a recent guest on the podcast, and yeah, it's just long form discussions with top shelf creatives in writing and music, and would love to share what we're doing there.
Yeah, it's an awesome podcast and a cool way to kind of get a window into the Nashville scene. A lot of the artists that people you've heard of and people you haven't heard of that are really the heartbeat of this city. So I really enjoy watching it, so I highly recommend it. Yeah. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it. Love it, man.
All right.
That was great.
We did it?
So
okay.
awesome. Yeah.
Okay, good.
That was great.